It's a pass.
And I think it would be really cool to have one, at least as a tool. And you know what? I just think of when I was growing up, I played those Line6 spiders, and I had fun twiddling with those knobs.
Tell you what, I want a spider just as much. Welcome to ToneBros. My name's Casey.
And I'm Colin. We're going to get started with our current topic of the day, which is the Line6 Pod Express.
Yeah, the old kidney bean.
No, it's not the old pod. So this is a normal stomp box.
Okay.
But if you haven't seen it already, so there's,
I have seen
okay,
it, yeah.
There's an on-off. There's tap tempo switch. You can choose your amp. You can choose your delay. You can choose your reverb. You can choose kind of a whole bunch of stuff.
Yep.
So, are you interested in it? What do you think about it? This is a new product. I think it got released in March. So, I don't know. What are your thoughts?
I think it's awesome. I actually thought the old kidney bean pod was pretty amazing.
Mm-hmm.
I knew a lot
They
of
still
people...
sell that, by the way.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't mean amazing like tone. I thought it was an amazing piece of like a tool that you could use.
Right.
I thought a lot of people were using it to record with back in the day. I know there were a lot of famous albums that thing was used for the guitar sound, which is crazy.
That's weird.
But yeah, I think it's awesome that they're putting that out. I think it's really cool that they're updating it and moving it into a stomp box because, I mean, everybody's going to stomp box type stuff for amp sims and for different multi-effects. I think they're entering a market probably that, I mean, Line 6 is in that market, obviously, with like the HX stuff. My question, I guess, is with it, I mean, it's cool that they're doing that. Why would somebody go to that rather than an HX stomp?
Right. I think to me this is more of a on the fly type of thing.
Okay.
So the HX stomps, obviously you gotta have your presets ready to go.
Yep.
You gotta have your whole line figured out. So to me this is like the simplified version of a pod.
Okay.
So and it's much more stomp box.
Yeah.
Like it is not like super tweakable like the HX.
You're not flipping through a bunch of menus or anything.
Right.
It looked like it was just knobs you turned. I did listen to a little demo of it. I didn't get in the huge feature set of it talking about it. But I think it's really cool. Mm-hmm. I think that it and probably the Boss IR2, which, I mean, I know I've kept bringing it up the last little bit whenever we're talking because I think, though, you know, it's probably going to be the front runner for all these, like, oh, crap, emergency backup rig pedals. Mm-hmm. And probably this Pod Express is going to be the other option.
Right.
You know,
I think the cool thing about this Pod Express, so the Boss IR2, that's pretty much just an amp.
It is just amps. I think there's reverb in there, but I think that's it.
So the Pod Express will even, like, if your pedal board goes down, like, you really could use it for delay or whatever. If you had to.
Yeah, it would be a bad situation, right?
It would be a bad situation. But I think it's a really good, like, and I'm sure you've heard the demos. Like, there's some good sounds that come out of that thing for $200
for what it is.
Right.
For what it is, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah. So I think it's pretty neat.
I think it's awesome. I'm glad to see Line 6 doing something like that. It's a little more, you know. I'm a tactile knob guy. I like switches and knobs and not menus and like. I don't want to have to read a giant manual to get through a pedal. So that type of thing's right up my alley.
Right.
I think they're, you know, heading exactly where I would want a company to go.
And think about it like you're, you know, if this is for a player that's using it as like an oh crap rig.
Yeah.
You know, you really don't want to flip through a bunch of menus.
And you're not going to be familiar with it because it's your, you know, everything's went down.
So everything's quick on the fly. I think it's great.
It's your lifeboat rig, right?
I think it's great.
I think it's amazing. I hope they keep coming out with stuff like that. I hope other companies jump on the bandwagon. Not necessarily for just like backup stuff, but the idea of the simplicity, you know, jumping right to knobs and that stuff. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to move into the main topic. And our main topic today is going to be talking about what would your heroes be playing today? So we're talking about the heroes of yesteryear, or we're going to be talking about, you know, the people we've lost. So if you're talking Jimmy, if you're talking Stevie Ray Vaughan, if you're talking, I mean, even Kurt Cobain and all those guys, what would they be playing today? Not necessarily specific gear, but kind of like what route would they be going today?
Okay.
So, or I mean, I guess we could even look at guys that are alive today. But if they were younger today, where would they be going? So, I was thinking about this the other day, and I sent you a funny little meme, and it was Jimi Hendrix. Jimi Hendrix was playing in front of like 2 full stacks, and it was like, oh, look at Hendrix's new rig. It was 2 full stacks, but on the top of it was Kemper's.
Right. Yeah.
And Hendrix has moved to Kemper or something like that, it said on it.
Mm-hmm.
So, do you think Hendrix would be playing a Kemper?
If Hendrix was out there now,
Yeah.
I think a Kemper's in question.
Okay.
For sure. I think Fractal. Any of those modelers, I think that's in question. I would hope that someone like Stevie Ray Vaughan, would still play his Fenders.
Yeah.
I would really hope that. I'm thinking about Randy Rhoads. He would use a modeler.
Yeah, Randy Rhoads, that's a great one, yeah.
He's using that Distortion Plus into a modeler and calling it a day.
Oh my god.
That's him. But honestly, I really do think a lot of people would probably choose like the ease of gear now. I think Hendrix probably would still rely on an amp just for like feedback and stuff.
Yeah.
He would not be the same player he was.
No, he would have changed a lot, right? You can't, thinking about that, you obviously almost can't get their playing out of your head how they were then, but you know that they would be radically different.
Right. Like I'm trying to think if John Fogerty was coming out today.
Yeah.
I feel like he would be like Jack White and he would play like Silvertone amps. Like
maybe so.
Something that he just grabbed and plugged in, some PV amps, maybe whatever was around. I don't know. I don't think you would see a whole lot of Marshalls. I really don't.
No, I don't think you would see a lot of Marshalls either. I think that, thinking about some of those players you're talking about, Hendrix was always on the forefront. He was always pushing things to the limits, trying to get new sounds with gear, and making, something new or something unique out of something that seemed kind of normal. So, I think he would probably be trying everything new out there. Right. I think he would be checking out all the Quad Cortex pedal. Stuff. He would, oh my god.
He would have a whammy pedal.
He definitely would have played one. I hope he would throw it in the garbage.
Come on.
But he definitely would have tried one. He would be playing with EBOs and all kinds of crazy stuff probably. But I think he would definitely be pushing to the forefront. I think Stevie had enough. I mean, he was definitely unique and pushing in his time period. But I think he also had like a classic vibe to him. And I think maybe, he was playing, I guess there at the end he had that Dumble and he had Soldano.
Soldano.
And I guess that was kind of where he ended. So he was pushing a little bit different, but I kind of think that he would be in the lines of like Robin Ford and have like a Dumble that he was playing all the time and in love with, or some classic amps, because he wasn't pushing sounds in the same way Jimmy was. Jimmy was pushing sounds in a much different way.
Stevie Ray Vaughan, might be like in the 2-rock category too.
Yeah, I could definitely see him playing 2-rock. Having a sing instead of Joey Landreth 2-rock, it's a Jimmy or a Stevie Hendrix. Stevie Hendrix.
Yeah,
Stevie Ray Vaughan 2-rock. So, I don't know. There's a bunch of cool players. Randy Rhoads, he would definitely be using a modeler, I think.
I think so. Yeah, you think about all these like hard rock players now. I mean, almost everyone's using a Fractal. Like, no one's hardly taken their actual amps, like, besides Billy Joe Armstrong. I'm pretty sure he's the only one left.
I think it's just I saw Steve Morris from the Dixie Dregs. He was doing an interview here a while back, and he was showing his guitar rigs, and he was playing some Ingles. And, oh, my gosh, he sounded amazing. And he's one of the few guys, I think, that's really out there touring with a pretty large rig like that these days. It's just... I don't know. I was thinking about it. I saw that funny meme and thought, what would our heroes be playing today? I think there's some of them that be pushing to the forefront, and I think there's a few that be playing classics, and then I think there's some people that probably just wouldn't care and would just use whatever's, buy them and convenient. I don't think Kurt Cobain is probably being too picky. I think he's probably grabbing whatever's next to him to play.
I would think so, but I mean, it goes without saying, like, had they had the stuff that we had now, they would not be the same players at all.
No.
Like Hendrix would be a completely different player.
Gosh.
I think Randy Rhoads would be in the same category.
Yeah.
I think Steve Ray Vaughan would have been more probably in that boutique realm. You know what I mean? So I just think, I don't know, things would have been different for sure. So
I don't know. You want to move on to gas or pass?
Sure. So my gas or pass, if I can remember what it is speaking of Kempers.
Okay.
I've always looked at them, but I've never really taken them serious.
Okay, the actual Kemper. Okay.
An actual profiler head.
Yep.
I think there's some you can find that are $1,400, some that are $1,800, and I can't remember which is which, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
But you can get a Kemper, let's just say $1,800.
Yep.
And I honestly think it would be the best home studio, home amp there ever was, because you can model anything you wanted.
Mm-hmm.
You could plug in your pedals, have a totally unique sound from, minute to minute. And I think it would be absolutely fantastic. I would think it would be a nightmare trying to do it live, just because I haven't messed with those, so I don't know. Like, is this like a Boss Multi-Effects where the volume just jumps like crazy?
Right.
Like, I don't know how it works.
Yeah.
I've never played one, but I've always been interested in the Kemper, and I think for home usage, it's like the best thing that you could probably get.
When you say that, are you talking for like bedroom practicing, living room practicing?
I'm talking about...
Or like studio?
I'm talking about studio, just being inspired at home.
Oh,
so
gross.
I really do think it would work great.
Yeah.
Now, is it something, like I said, probably not something I want to take to a gig.
Yeah.
With that many knobs, that sounds like a nightmare waiting to happen.
Well, ideally, you get your presets and you're done. You get a foot controller for it.
Ideally.
Yeah.
But I also know my luck.
Yeah.
And I'll accidentally bump it off the cab or whatever it is. So.
Yeah.
Anyways, curious. What are your thoughts? For $1,800?
$1,800.
Is it something that you're interested in? Because to me, it's yeah, for sure.
And it's a complete no way for me. No way I'm interested in it. So my thing is with it, for at home, the last thing I want to worry about or want to do is plug in a digital Kemper. Like, I've got the ability at my house to be able to crank up this Marshall. I've got the ability to crank up a loud amp at my house.
Right.
I know I'm lucky there.
I was about to say, because I don't have that luxury.
Right, and people live in I've lived in apartment buildings where I can't crank up amps. We've all been there in those cases. But if I've got the ability to do it, why in the world would I ever move into something digital that's trying to mimic that? I can understand the idea of maybe having different amp models to play through and all kinds of different things. But for me, that's less inspiring most of the time because I twiddle with knobs and I'm just trying to find sounds all day. Versus if I've just got one really great sound that I'm plugging into, an amp that does one thing in particular amazing.
I'm not saying it's going
to... That's it.
I'm not saying it's going to replace that. Because I still will have amps. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah, I know.
I just think it would be a great tool in the arsenal.
I think it'd be a great tool. I don't know. I would rather have another amp
instead of having the option to click oh, here's a Dumble inspired.
It's
thing.
not.
Here's
though. It's just not.
It's not.
It's just not.
But it would be, to me, in the moment when you're practicing, it would be super inspiring.
Yeah, it would be inspiring in the moment when you're practicing, probably. But I don't know. And maybe I'm being silly here, but I feel like I'm past that working for inspiration for me. Like, the idea of clicking a button and trying to get like a different sound, almost like playing into my pedal board and trying to get a bunch of different sounds with that, I kind of feel the same way about. Like, it is not super inspiring a lot of times for me to do that whenever I'm sitting at home to play more. I just want a simple sound and to be working on whatever I'm working on at the time. And I think it would be giving me like a paralysis by analysis type situation where I'm just not able to pick anything. Taking it to a live gig, I've got no desire. Right. That's the sum of the problem. I could be totally wrong, but I think a huge problem with taking these modelers out to gigs these days and some of the guitar sounds not working out well, I think one of the biggest problems is people want to have a different amp and a completely different rig in their Profiler or their whatever it is, Quad Cortex or whatever, for every song. This song is a Marshall. This next song is 2 Vox AC30s in stereo. This next song is a Fender Twin super clean. This next song's... The problem is, like, whenever you're trying to EQ that out front of house, you've got to change the EQ for all that stuff. You can EQ it as much as you want on that profiler and stuff, but they've got to change that stuff. And when you're jumping from amp to amp for every song, they're having to adjust all that stuff. If you're going to do that, you kind of need to pick out like 2 or 3 amps and like only use those, I think. I think that's a huge problem that people fall into, and a trap people fall into with those modelers.
I think you're going way into left field.
Yeah. Gas or pass for a Kemper. It's a pass.
And I think it would be really cool to have one, at least as a tool. And you know what? I just think of when I was growing up, I played those Line 6 spiders, and I had fun twiddling with those knobs.
Tell you what, I want a spider just as much. My gas or pass, folks. We are going to move into that. I want to talk about something that we spoke about a while back. I want to talk about the JHS Milkman delay.
Okay.
So this is their delay pedal they've got that's specifically designed for slapback. Only goes to 250 milliseconds, so it's pretty fast delay. And then it's got a boost on the end. I think the boost is at the end of the circuit.
Okay.
Might be beforehand, but I think it's in the. It'd be cool if it was at the end. But they're $179 brand new, so pretty reasonable. I think it's all mono, nothing wild or special about that. What's your opinion on this delay? Is it a gas or pass?
I keep going back and forth because I've looked at it over and over.
Yeah.
And I think it's a really cool idea, especially for a small board.
I love it. Yeah.
For a small board?
For a small board, I love it.
I mean, you got your slapback and you got a boost. What else do you need, you know? Not much.
Not much.
A
little overdrive before the boost.
I think it's completely awesome. The thing that I get confused on is the delay itself.
Yep.
Because they don't really say, if I remember right, they don't really say if it's analog, if it's whatever, because it has that EQ knob and you can make it as like bright or as dark as you wanted it to be.
Yeah.
And from what I've gathered,
if it's digital, bad. It'd be bad if it's digital, just like our last product we were talking about.
That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is I don't know if it's analog. I don't know if it's trying to emulate tape. I don't know.
I think it's set up to be just like an analog style delay. I don't know that it's true fully analog or if it is digital, but I think it's meant to be just like an analog slapback delay. It's definitely not supposed to be a digital sound, and I don't think it's supposed to be tape or anything.
Right. So I think it's one of those pedals that I would really like to try it.
Yep.
And I'd be really curious to see how that delay actually sounded.
Yeah.
Before I made my final decision. But I've been interested in it for like as soon as it was released.
Yeah.
So it's just one of those pedals I have not had the chance to actually try out yet.
Yeah.
So it's a gas for sure.
Okay, I haven't got to play it. I have came to the realization lately that I think I'm a 2 delay pedal guy.
Okay.
I think I need 2 delays on just about every board. I want some type of slapback and I want some type of longer delay, and I need probably the longer delay to probably have a tap tempo on it, ideally.
Right.
So whenever I'm thinking about that and putting boards together, this Milkman delay is a definite gas. The idea of having the boost in there with it too is even that much better. It saves me another pedal basically.
Right.
So it'll give me a good solo boost. Even if it's before or after the delay, it doesn't matter. My overdrives are before that anyway. So it's going to be post overdrives. So if I've got enough clean headroom in the amp, it's going to give me a great boost for solos. So, yeah, and I like the sound of analog delay for a good slapback. Right. You know, I don't want necessarily tape for my slapback or anything like that. I just want like straight up analog delay most of the time. So, yeah, it's a definite gas for me too.
If you're looking at analog delays for just a slapback though, granted this one has a boost, but the way huge, and it's actually mini Aquapus or whatever it is.
Yep.
Like I've looked at those a lot.
My go-to for analog slapback delay for a long time has been my carbon copy.
Right.
It sounds great. Really good slapback delay. And speaking of way huge, it's old George Trips that made that.
Right.
So, I mean, just saying.
Right. I don't know. I think the Milkman's cool though. I'd be interested.
Me too. So double gas.
That's right. All right, so my main topic.
I'm ready.
No, the video didn't freeze. All right. Guitar knobs.
Yeah.
Are they your friend or are they your mortal enemy? Because I think to me, it depends on the guitar.
Yeah.
I think usually when I have a Les Paul and I have those two tone knobs, what usually happens is I will fiddle with the tone knob all day on the bridge pickup and then totally forget about the neck pickup.
Yeah.
And then you know have a telly and I will mess with the tone knob a lot.
Yeah. Well, here's a little tip. Turn your tone knob down a little bit and then turn this one down a little bit and then sometimes turn it up a little bit and turn it up a little bit. So for me, I think they are definitely your friend. So we kind of subscribe to the thought of, both of us, tell me if I'm wrong, but both of us subscribe to the thought of you probably shouldn't have all your knobs on 10 all the time.
Right. I almost have my knobs always on like 8 or 7.
Both of them? Tone and volume?
Yeah, usually.
Okay. So
because I like to use my volume as like a solo boost.
Okay, that makes sense. So I like to go and I usually set my volume on like 8, 8.5, and I probably put on Les Paul, and I probably put my treble pickup on the same. For my neck, I put about 8, 8.5 on the volume, but then my tone on my neck pickup, I usually have all the way up on 10. I usually do. Unless I'm going for something really warm, and I'll reach over. But my like go-to neck pickup sound is usually the neck pickup on 10. Because, and just being honest, a lot of times you get in the mix or you get playing with somebody with your neck pickup in a Les Paul style guitar, they're just really warm.
Right.
And if you don't have something to cut through a little bit, you're going to lose it. Having these down, though, it does mean that my amp is probably brighter than the average beasts, right? So, like, if somebody else came up and played my amp, they'd be like, boy, that thing's bright, if they didn't, have the volumes down a little bit. Also means I can get my amp pushed a little bit harder. So I can push my amp a little bit more and turn my volume down. Because you're not only just lowering your volume, you're lowering the gain down because you're not pushing as much signal. Same with the tone knob. You are lowering the gain some too. Is it the fact that there's 4 knobs on the Les Pauls and stuff that you're just like, you only want to fiddle with so many? Like it's just a pain in the butt? Because a telly is,
a lot easier.
Just 2 knobs.
And, I love juniors for the sake of 1 tone and 1 volume.
Yeah.
Similar to the telly. Like, to me, it just makes perfect sense. The Strat, I think it's really useful to have the 2 tones, especially if you have one hooked up to the bridge.
Yeah. Is that your like preference, is to hook it up to the bridge?
Yeah, absolutely. So having 1 bridge tone knob on a Strat, and then you can have neck and middle or just neck, whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
But typically, I will have the bridge pickup on a Strat rolled to like 8, and the neck pickup around 8 or 9. And I ride my volume. So, I mean, usually if I'm trying to get like a crunch sound or some type of like low gain rhythm, it's 5. And then if it's...
That's low.
It is low. And then if
on
I'm
a
actually
Strat?
playing a... No. I'm sorry. On Gibsons. On a
okay.
Strat, usually it's like a 7.
I was going to say, yeah.
On a Strat, usually it's 7. And if I'm playing like a rock rhythm, it's like 8, 8.5.
Okay.
And then, all the way up is my solo tone.
Yeah.
So I always ride the volume for solo tone, which is why I don't really need solo boost pedals.
Yeah.
Just because I like having like that flexibility in the tone.
Yeah.
And also when you, like you said, as you roll up that volume, you're going to get more highs in there too.
Yep.
So it just automatically gives you a solo boost with just the frequency alone, not even including the volume and the gain that you get.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I love using my volume knob for sure. The tone knobs, I'll be honest, I get in the habit of set it and forget it, but usually it's like on 8.
Yeah.
So then I can change it as needed, depending on the amp. But for the most part, like you said, I set my amps pretty bright and roll my tone to 8 and pretty much just adjust it as needed. So I use the tone knobs all the time. I mean, Joe Bonamassa, he swears by it with his Les Pauls. I mean, he can make a Les Paul sound pretty thin with his tone knobs and everything.
Pretty crazy, really.
It is. And I think it's like super underutilized, especially when you get into like modern players. Like I feel like now one example of this, I'm gonna butcher his name,
James Nichols.
Thank you. I knew it was Jared and Nichols, but I couldn't remember the middle.
Yep.
He's the exception.
Yeah.
I feel like he is one of the newer players that totally.
I think Chris Buck does a pretty good job.
He does a good job.
I think he does a pretty good job. There's a select few players that are doing it, but most players are turning everything to 10 and hoping their pedals do all the work for them. Right. But all the nuance is in your volume and your tone.
Absolutely.
It's in your volume and your tone, and it's where you're picking on this string. Mm-hmm. You're picking close to the bridge, how you're attacking
using your fingers instead of a pick.
The angle of your pick. I mean, what pick you're using.
Right.
It's all the nuances. And if you just want to get the sound from a pedal, well, that's cool. Mm-hmm. But that's like using a sledgehammer when you just need like a small little precision tool.
Right.
You know, in my opinion. Of course, you can set them differently where it's just, you know, light overdrive. But yeah, it's all in the volume and tone. You can adjust way more than just volume and tone with your volume and tone.
And I think people forget all the time that, you know, you set the amp how you like it, everything's at 10, and then you just move the volume. When really, you know, and even Jimmy Page said, people forget about this tone knob on the guitar. You know, you set this a little bit brighter, and then you've got a lot more flexibility.
Yeah, I set my amp up with my volume on like 8.5.
Right.
In my tone down. That's my like stock setting.
Right.
And I work from there.
Yep.
You know, I can go down or I can go up. But yeah, it pushes your amp harder. You get a little closer to where you want. I will say, to do all that, if you want to be able to get more volume when you turn up and you just want like straight up volume, you better have an amp with some more headroom.
Sure.
You don't want to be playing a little Champ or a little Princeton, have it cranked up, and expect to get more volume by turning up whenever the amp's cranked.
And really, when you're fiddling with the volume and tone knobs, honestly, it's trial and error. Yeah. You're going to have to decide for yourself if you like doing that or if you enjoy the convenience of turning on a pedal. You know, that's to the players, like what they actually like. But I love using the volume and tone.
One other thing
I just don't use it as much as I should.
One other thing about it is also what pots are in there, what wiring is in there. Is it 50s wired? Is it more modern wired? Do you have a bright cap in there?
Sure.
What's the word I'm looking for? Treble bleed. Do you have a treble bleed circuit in there? There's a lot of things you can do in here to make those more or less reactive too. Mm-hmm. And some people like a really quick taper or a little bit slower taper. Those are all things to play with too, but just start by turning down that volume. Start by turning down that tone. Mm-hmm. Your knobs are your friend.
I was about to say, you know, as you get more experience in playing guitar, I think the more you'll utilize everything that's on your guitar and less on the amp.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just, absolutely. The amp's the platform you work off of, but all the nuances in the guitar.
Yep.
It's how you're playing it. It's all those things we talked about. And that comes with time. You know,
sure.
When you start doing anything, it's, you know, it's the big motions you're learning. And then as you get better at the big motions, you start learning there's little nuances to those big motions.
And you know what? On live gigs, there's a big learning curve. I mean, you know, do I have time to switch pickups and then change the volume tone? You know, those are all
You
things.
might not.
You might not. So it just depends on, you know, what you're doing, what kind of shows you're playing, you know, if it is live or studio settings. So
yeah, I think that's it. Yep. So I think that'll be it for this week, guys. We'll see you next time.
See you next time.